Hello guys, welcome to my channel. So I have been getting a lot of questions on CRUD application specifically. So I have created a lot of videos on Spring Boot, Spring, JSP, Timeleaf, and I have created few courses on Udemy also related to that part only. But as there are a lot of questions, so I have thought of another way to create a CRUD application but with minimalistic approach. So here we are not going to use any big software or tool. Here we are going to use simply Spring Boot, in-memory database and RESTful web services. So here I will try to explain each and every part of the code as simple as possible. So here we are not going to talk about big things, but here we will talk about new things which maybe are not popular right now but are unique, so let's learn about them. So before moving on to the code part, if you are new to my channel, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. Now let's quickly move on to the code. So first thing first, we have to start with Spring Initializer. So here we are going to keep everything as default. We are not going to change anything here. So here I am going to change the artifact name. So I'll just do application, CRUD application. Right, now talking about the version, we are going to use 17 and we are going to use dependencies like Spring Web because we are going to create a RESTful application, so we need Spring MVC or Spring Web. Then we are going to use the in-memory database, which we are going to use H2. Now for the database connectivity, we are going to use JPA here. And lastly, we are going to use Lombok. So Lombok is a Java annotation library which will help us to reduce the unnecessary part of code which we have to write. So here we are not going to create a lot of unnecessary or boilerplate code, but it is going to be a start for a bigger approach. So I have already created a video on Lombok, so I will put the link of that video in the description, so do check it out if you want to learn more about Lombok. So here we have 4 dependencies: Spring Web, S2 database, JPA and Lombok, and nothing else. So let's generate this code. Now I'm going to use my favorite IDE, which would be IntelliJ. You can choose Eclipse here. You just have to import this folder. You have to first extract this zip file and then you have to import it. So let's do that quickly. Alright, so now the project is opened. So let's start with the coding part. But first, let's make some property changes. So first thing first is that I'm not going to use 8080 as the default port. I'm going to use 9090 here. And talking about database, we have to do 4 things. First is that we need the URL, then we need the class, driver class, then the username and the password. That is the usual thing that we always do for our database property changes. So here we are going to do those first. So let me brief about this. So here we are using JDBC for the database connectivity. We are going to use H2 database, which is going to be in-memory database, and the database name is going to be test database. So as we are using H2 database, here we don't need another set of installation. So here we are not going to install any software. This is just embedded as in memory. So while this application is running, then only this database is going to exist. But when we stop the application, then it will die. So it is as simple as that. There are 2 options. Here we can either use in memory or as a file. So if we are talking about file, then we have to provide the location for that and then it will save there. Right, so I thought let's start with in memory. Then the database driver name has to be for your S2 database, so which is this one. The default username for this is SA and the password is empty. So that is what we are going to use here. We are not going to change anything because we like to keep it simple. Now let's talk about queries now. So I want to show the queries so that I will be able to know what queries are running in case there is any problem with the code, right? So for that I'm going to use spring.jpa.showSQL property, and let me tell you, if you are not aware about this, this is not related to H2. This is related to your SQL queries, which are going to get generated even if you are using Hibernate or any other tool, right? Now we are using JPA here, and JPA by default uses Hibernate internally. So we are going to again keep it simple. So here the dialect is going to be of H2. So that is why this property. And now the most important thing is going to be, how do we want a database creation to be? Should it be create or update? So here we are going to go with update, right? And then we have another option with H2, which is that, do you want a console or not? So with this console, we can execute the queries to see what data do we have in our specific tables, right? So this is like your workbench where you can execute queries, see the data, delete some data, things like that. So it is a console for it. Now, as we have enabled this console, we can also provide at which path do we want this console to be. So by default we have h2 console, but we are going to change it because we like to keep it simple. So in our case it is going to be just h2. Now we are done with our properties. Now let's start with our models. So let's first create the package. Now let's create the class. So I'm going to use book here because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a book, update a book, delete a book, or view the books. So it's like your library where you can add a new book, update, let's say the price of it or the title of it, and view all the books that you have in your library, or delete one, right? So as this is going to be your table also, so we are going to need it to be an entity. And as we are going to change the name of this table, we are not going to use book here. So let's change the name to books. That's it. Now, like I said before, we are going to use Lombok here. So Lombok reduces your boilerplate code. And according to me, the boilerplate code is going to be your constructors, which are no argument constructor, parameterized constructor, and then you have your getters and setters, then you have your toString method. So I don't want to create anything here. So I will use annotations here because Lombok is an annotation based library. So it provides us that. So first I need to create a no argument constructor. So for this annotation, then I need all argument constructor. So here whatever arguments or variables I'm going to create in this class, they all will get used up to create this constructor. Now we need setter, getter, and the toString method. Right. Now what do we need here? So first we need an ID which has to be long. Then we are going to need the title and the author. So we are here keeping it simple. We don't want to add more and more information. You can elaborate this, but right now we are going to keep it simple. So we are going to have only these three properties where we can update these two, right? Now we are done with our model. Now let's create a repository. So again we have to create a package for this, and then we will create an interface. So let's say book repo, and I created a class instead of interface, and this is going to implement JPA repository, because JPA repository provides us a lot of by default functionality which we don't have to create often. So here we are going to add nothing, just the object on which it is actually going to have your CRUD operation, and the unique ID or the primary ID, you can say. So our unique ID is of type long, so that's that. And we don't need any method here. I forgot this. and that is it. Now we have to annotate this as repository because this is a repository. Now we are again done with the repository. Now we have to create the controller. So let's first create the package controller. Now let's create the class. So book controller. So this is going to be a controller, and we are not going to just use a controller but a REST controller. So yep. Now let's move to the hard part. So first we need a repository object. So we'll do book repo here, and let's auto wire this. Now we have to create 4 things here. So first is going to be our method, which is going to be get all books, then get book by ID, then add book, then update book by ID, then delete book by ID. Alright, now this get method or methods are going to be your get mapping annotated. Same goes for this one, but this one is going to be your post mapping because this is a post request. Same goes for this one. This one has to be your delete mapping, and you can work it out with post mapping also, but yeah, let's use the obvious one, delete mapping. Now these are not actually going to return nothing. As we are creating the RESTful web services, so they have to return something as a response. So we are going to use here response entity. So this is going to return all the books, as in a list of books. So here we will do list, and here we will do book. Alright, so now let's start with this method. So first is we will see if there are any exception. So in case anything is happening out of context, then we will do return new response entity, and here we will just do http status as internal server error. Right, now we have to get all the books, and for that we need a collection as a list. So here we will do list of book. This will be your book list, and here I'm going to use Java 8 features. So first I will call book repo, then I will call out the method from your JPA repository, which is find all. Through that I will iterate over each book object and use my collection and add everything to it. Right, now we have this list, but we are again not sure whether it will have the data or not. What will happen if we haven't add anything to our library and trying to get all the books, right? So in that case, this repository, this collection book list is going to be empty. So let's add a check for this. If book list is empty, so if it is empty, then I will use http status no content, right? So let's do that. No content, right? But if everything is going to work out just fine, then I'm just going to do response entity, which is going to be your OK. Right, so this is it what we have to do for our get all books. But for our get book by ID, we need a path variable here, right, which is going to be of type long and ID, and I forgot the URL. So here it will be get book by ID and then ID. This one is going to be get all books. Alright, so let's quickly proceed ahead. So again, this is not going to be void, this is going to be response entity, and as we are here going to return a single object of type book, so this is going to be book. Now here what we have to do is we will use our repository to call the method find by ID, and here we will provide ID. But good thing to remember is that this is going to return an optional object, right? If you remember about Java 8 features, this was a newly addition to Java 8 features. So here it could be null, it could be present, right? So if it is present, in that case I will say yeah, everything is fine. So let's copy this line. Right, but I forgot one thing, I'm just returning the status but not the data, and we have to return the data also, right? So here we will return book list also, and here we will just do book data. Right, now if it is empty, if it is null, in that case what we have to do, we will just do return new response entity, and here the HTTP status is going to be not found, as in there wasn't any data for this particular ID that we are trying to search over. So here I forgot that we need get method to actually get the data. Now we are done with a get book by ID. Again, you can add try and catch here for more elaboration. Now coming down to add book, the URI is going to be just add book, and here we will have a request body of type book. Right, now you can add try catch here, but I'll just ignore it. So let me start slow. So again I will call book repo, and we will have a method save. Here we just have to provide the object that we want to save to the database. But remember that this is also going to return something back, which is going to be the object that is going to get created at the database end. So here we are not going to have an ID variable, we are just going to have the title and the author information. But as here we are going to add the strategy as auto, it is going to create the ID value for us. So which means that when we are saving the object, the code is going to help us annotate an ID value to this book object and return the entire object back. So here we are only going to have title and author information, but here we will get ID, title and author, all three of them. Alright, Now once the object is created, we will just return the response. First we will return the object that we have created and the HTTP status as okay. Everything went good. And then we have to change this to this. Alright, good to go. Now talking about update, so this one is going to be update book by ID, and here we will need a path variable ID. Right, now again we have to first find this, whether this is there or not. So it isn't going to be like we are providing the ID and what will happen if the ID is not there, right? So that can be a human mistake. So we have to take care of that scenario also. So this is again going to return us an optional object like before. Now first we will check if the data is present or not. So if it is present, then we have to update the data, and that data is going to be here as request body book, and let's say new book data, right? So first we will get the old book data. So let's change this to old book data, and let's get the data out. Right, now we are going to save this, as in we will update this data. So let's do updated book data. Now how will we update this? We will just call our setter method. So in case we have changed the title, then we will just do new book data dot get title, and if we have updated the author, then we will just set author from our new book data. And we could have done both also, right? So that is a possibility. Now we have a new updated data object, but we haven't saved this to the database. So again we will take help from our repository and call the method save. So there isn't any update method, we are just going to use same method here and just provide the updated object, and then again it is going to return us the updated object. So we will just return this back as a response. And the HTTP status as okay. But what will happen if it is not present? If the old data is not present, in that case we will just say not found, right? So let's copy this. And let's change the return type. Alright, good to go. Now again for this we will have similar to what we have done before. So delete book by ID and then the path variable. So path variable is going to be long ID. Here we are going to call a different method which is going to be delete by ID, and here we will just provide ID, and then we will just return response entity. Here we don't have to return any object. Here we will just return that whether the operation was successful or not, right? So here we will just say okay, and then let's change. So here we will just do response entity, and here we will just do HTTP status, and that is it. That is what we have to do. Now let's quickly run the application, and first we will see the H2 console, and we will try to execute the queries there also, and then we will see the restful operations one by one, right? Alright, so the application is up. Now let's quickly check the logs. So here you can see that the application got started at our port, and the S2 console is now available at this path, and here we can see that the table book has been created, and the sequence is going to start with 1 and increment by 1. So yeah, that's good. Now let's quickly log into our S2 database. So here we will just do 9090 and H2. So this is going to be the default implementation, and here I don't have to change anything. This one is good enough. You can try to test it also. If it is green, then yeah, you are good to go to connect. Once you connect, you will see something like this. So here you can see that the table books has been created. So if you have multiple tables, you will see all that information here. Now if I try to hit the query, so let's start from books and just press run. It will execute and it will say there is no row. Yeah, so we are good, right? So now let's quickly use Postman to execute the operations. So first is going to be our post operation, because we first have to create the data. So we will use add book, and inside the body it is going to be raw but of type JSON. So we just need title. So let's say book 1. I'm not going to be creative here, author 1. So that is it. Now let's send this. So as you can see, we got the data back with the ID. Now let's try to create another one. So now we got the other one also. Now let's see what we have. So this is going to be our GET request. So get all books. Now let's see what we have. So it sent us back 200, okay, but we didn't get any data. Now let's see what we have done wrong. Okay, so what we have done is, if it is empty, we are returning the book list, which is not really required. But here we do. So that was my bad. So we now have to recreate the data, because once we stop this application, we have to create the data again. So that's a huge pain, but yeah, we are learning something new, so why not? Alright, so now let's quickly add the data. Now let's get the data. So now we have got the information, right, as expected. Now let's try one more, get book by ID. So here I will do 2. So I got book 2, author 2, which is good, right? Now let's try to update the data. So update is again going to be our post. And I'm going to update the book 2, right? So here I will just go to body, keep it raw, as type JSON, and here I will do title. I will keep title. Yeah, let's change the title. So let's change the title to book 21. Again, not being creative here. And let's do author 2. So here I'm just keeping it. So let's change this one also to 21, right? Now let's send this, and I got this weird error. Okay, alright, I don't know what happened there, but we got the updated data, right? So this is this. Now we are good with update also. Now let's try to delete one. So to delete, we just have to do like this. And as I love the ID2 so much, I'm going to delete this one. So here I don't have to do anything, just send this one, and it sent me back 200. Okay, which is good. Now if I want to see if I got anything, so here if I execute this, you can see 404 not found. And if I do get all books, in that case I just got one. So these are all the CRUD operation, and this is what I thought of as the most simple way that I could have used to explain to create a CRUD application. So if you like this, don't forget to like this, and please subscribe to my channel, and if you want to share this, yeah, please do. And if you have any kind of feedback for me, or if you have any kind of request on which you want me to make a video on, yeah, please hit that on the comment section. And I really hope that we will meet in some another video. Till then, have a good day, stay safe, and bye bye.